All right, everybody. Welcome to this edition of Bird Brain 66. I'm Brian Bretsch. On the other side is
Andy T.
good buddies. We've known each other for forever and a day, 50 some years. And we're here to talk about the 1976 Cardinals set. But before we do that, we have a special guest who's also going to join us and talk about his collection and just his memories. Is Pride of Valmeyer 1A, or excuse me, 1B. I guess it's your dad, so we'll give him the shout out first. But we're excited to have Brad Rippelmeyer join us. So Brad, thanks for being a part of Bird Brain 66 this evening.
Sure, Brian, Andy, glad to be here. Look forward to talking baseball and talking baseball cards.
Well, thanks, appreciate it.
Yeah, definitely appreciate it. So you're playing Class A ball during the day. You're playing for Valmeyer. A great small town community playing baseball. You're fortunate enough you go away to Kansas State to play a little bit of college ball and get your degree, which I know is important to your family. So talk a little bit about first of all what it was like to be drafted, and then we'll talk a little bit about the baseball blood in your family.
Yeah, sure. Well, from the time I can remember, I don't remember thinking I wanted to do anything else but play pro baseball when I was growing up. And that came from being around my dad and traveling around with him and so forth. So that's really all I thought about. But as I was going through high school, I had three older sisters, and they were a big influence on me, as were my parents, and everybody, kind of instilled that I needed to go to school, needed to go to college. And I wasn't really good enough out of high school to get drafted high enough to skip college like some kids do. Some kids get a big enough signing bonus that their college can be paid for and they can go right into the minor leagues. And I just wasn't at that level in high school, and I really needed to go to college to keep playing and keep improving. So I did that, and went to Kansas State, which is, I got recruited by quite a few schools, but Kansas State was the one that I thought was going to give me the best opportunity to play right away as a freshman and also play against good competition. At that time, it was the Big Eight, but really good baseball schools like Oklahoma and Oklahoma State. And we played Wichita State and some other really good schools at that time. And so I thought, here's a place I can go play as a freshman and play against the best competition in the country. And 3 years later, I was lucky enough to get drafted by the Braves, and that kind of fulfilled my dream. I mean, the big leagues were definitely a dream, but the first step was playing professional baseball and getting into the minor leagues. And so I was able to do that out of Kansas State. So it was a great blessing.
So talk a little bit then too about was there any pressure, and we'll go ahead and introduce your dad obviously to this scenario as being a former player and a long time pitching coach for the Phillies, and that. Talk a little bit about was there any pressure for you to play professional baseball, or was there just any undue pressure with your dad being a major leaguer?
Yeah, I think I put a lot of pressure on myself, and he never really put any pressure on me. As a matter of fact, there was a time when I got to be 7th, 8th grade where he was the one that was constantly kind of propping me up and picking me up because I was the one that was so hard on myself. If I went 2 for 4, I was mad that I didn't get hits any other 2 times because I thought, well, if I'm going to get to the big leagues, I'm supposed to be that much better than everybody, and I'm supposed to be perfect. And it took him constantly explaining that, look, even guys like at that time, my idol was Mike Schmidt. He's like, look, Mike Schmidt didn't get a hit every time he was up when he was 14 years old. You've got to start realizing that this is a tough game and start to understand that there's ups and downs. And so he was probably one of my biggest confidence boosters. And it was me that put a lot of pressure on myself. But you learn to deal with that. Any athlete has to start learning to deal with the expectations, both they're putting on themselves and what other people are doing. And so over time, it wasn't so much the pressure. It was just the expectations of, man, I really want to do well, and the competitiveness in me that I really want to do well every time I'm up to bat, every time I'm on the ball field. And you just got to deal with that. But that's what separates guys who are really good from the ones who aren't, is that drive to be perfect all the time and do well all the time. So
So, you grow up in St. Louis. Your dad's with the Phillies organization. Do you have friends who ever made fun of you? Because again, we talked about this before we started recording. That you have obviously great memories of guys like Mike Schmidt and Larry Bowen and Pete Rose, et cetera, et cetera. But did anybody ever give you a hard time? Man, you're the local guy and you're rooting for the Phillies even before you were drafted.
For sure. I mean, all my friends were Cardinal fans, right? So I kind of grew up rooting against the Cardinals because my earliest memories are going to Busch Stadium and hearing 40,000 people root against my dad. That's what I thought when I was 7 years old. I was like, why are all these people rooting against my dad, right? So I started almost to test the Cardinals. And even though my best friends were Cardinals fans, they're still my best friends. But man, when it came down to who I liked or disliked, I just couldn't stand the Cardinals. Over time, once Dad got out of baseball for a while, starting in 1978, and then so the Phillies were good in the 70s, and I loved them. They won the World Series in 80 and then 83, but then the Cardinals got really good. They won the World Series in 82, obviously. 85 was a super exciting team. 87, fantastic team with Tommy and her and Jack Clark and those guys. And so I kind of became a little bit of a Cardinals fan just because I liked those players so much. And I just remember listening to Jack Buck and Mike Shannon on the radio and some of those great games they had, especially in 87 and through the playoffs. And so I kind of came around a little bit. Maybe I matured a little bit. I didn't detest or hate the Cardinals anymore. And I liked that my friends and the city was behind them. And so, I think I've learned to love them at least a little bit, but definitely when I was younger, it was all Phillies and I hated everybody else pretty much.
No, makes sense. So, were you fortunate enough? Did your dad take the family? Did you guys during the summertime, live, wherever? And it escapes me now off the top of my head. Were the Phillies in Florida, or were they in Arizona for spring training?
They were in Florida. They were in Clearwater, Florida, and we would go down there usually for a week or 10 days every spring. And I'd get to go to spring training and get out of school, which was a cool thing. And then at the last day of school, usually my mom would have our station wagon packed, and I would come home from school, and we would get in the station wagon and drive across the country to Philadelphia and spend 2.5 or 3 months out there. And then we would come back in mid or late August when school was going to start again. And during the first month of the season, April and half of May, and then August and September, the Phillies were in the National League East then with the Cardinals. And so they would usually come here in April or May, and then they would come again in September. And so we would get to see Dad during that time, and then we wouldn't see him for a few weeks until we got out to Philadelphia and so forth. But great memories. I mean, I was a spoiled little kid and I took it for granted at that time because I just didn't know any different. I from the first day I can remember, I was going to the ballpark with Dad, but my day was leave for the ballpark with him at 1:00 and go straight out on the field and play catch with sons of other major leaguers, and then stay out there for batting practice, catch shag fly balls off guys that were hitting. And I'll tell you one of my favorite stories in a second, but that's just what we did every day. And then during the games went down, we either sat with the ground crew right behind home plate, or we went in the tunnels under the stadium and we played pickle or hot box or whatever. And then when the game was over, waited for our dads to shower and get ready, get in the car, come home, and do it all again the next day. And then when Dad would leave on a road trip, it wasn't until my last year, his last year when I was 8 years old, I got to go on a couple road trips. But when he would go on a road trip, then we would do normal summer stuff. Mom would take us to the pool and to an amusement park. We'd go to the zoo. We'd do that for 6 or 7 days. And then when the Phillies came back in town, I went to the ballpark every day. So I mean, it's just fantastic. So it's a funny story that last year I got to go on a road trip to the Astrodome, and I was 8 years old and had not figured out how to catch a fly ball off the bat yet. My dad would throw me fly balls and he would hit me little fly balls. But when it came to a live ball off the bat, like somebody hitting batting practice, I would always run in. I'd stand out in the outfield, and as soon as it went up, I would run in because I saw it out in front of me, and then it would be over my head. And so it went on for the whole year. I was so determined. I've got to catch a ball off, one of these big leaguers, and so forth. So we're in the Astrodome, and Dad, like he often did, would throw early batting practice. So he threw that day to Mike Schmidt, Steve Carlton, and Bob Boone were the three guys taking batting practice. And Dad's throwing, and I'm the only other guy out there. And I say guy, I'm 8 years old. And in hindsight, I'm thinking, why would anyone let their 8-year-old son alone out in the outfield with guys like Mike Schmidt taking batting practice? But my dad, when I ask him about it now, he's like, well, I didn't think anything of it. I just figure you'll be all right. And if you get hurt, and, you'll be all right in a couple weeks or whatever. He's just kind of an old school guy, So I'm standing out in left field, and Mike Schmidt hits a line drive at me. And he hit it so hard that I just kind of stood there and froze. And all of a sudden it was about a foot to my left, and I stuck my glove out and caught it. And so the first ball I ever caught live off the bat was my dad throwing batting practice to Mike Schmidt, and he hit one to me in the Astrodome. And I caught two more that day. I think one off Bob Boone and another one off Mike Schmidt. And I remember when I caught it, I was so happy, and I looked, and I think my dad was jumping up and down on pitcher's mound, and Mike Schmidt and the guys are jumping up and down in the batting cage. And again, I think that's just crazy that a little 8-year-old kid was out there by himself with one of the best hitters in baseball hitting. But one of my favorite stories, I'll never ever forget it, obviously. So
That's cool. That's really cool.
Yeah.
So when you were talking about some of the guys are you still friends with some of the kids of those guys? Did you keep any relationships with any of the other guys from the Phillies organization that were around your age, or just kind of over time it just kind of goes away?
Over time we just kind of drifted apart. And in that day and age, there wasn't cell phones, or there wasn't an easy way to stay in contact. Aaron Boone was one guy that I ended up playing against a little bit in the minor leagues, and so we talked a little bit. And Pete Rose's son, we crossed paths in the minor leagues. And so we talked a little bit about the old times, but at that point, we were far from friends. We hadn't seen each other in, 15 years. And like I said, at that time, there was no way to stay in touch necessarily. If my dad would have stayed in baseball, then I probably would have kept seeing them and would have been closer to them. But he retired in 1978. That was his last year, and he retired for 10 years. So I went back to really being a normal kid then. I mean, Dad came back and ran our family farm. I grew up on a farm and playing sports like a lot of kids here in, Southern Illinois. And other than occasionally Dad taking me over to a ball game and seeing some of his old friends, we'd go down in the Phillies clubhouse. I was really kind of removed from that aspect of life. So I kind of lost touch with all those kids.
And did your love affair continue though with the Phillies then? I know you a little earlier said you'd kind of transitioned into the Cardinals a little bit, but you just always remained a Phillies fan.
For sure. I always lived and breathed with the Phillies. And so Dad retired in 78, but they won in 1980. They won the World Series, and I was ecstatic. And then they went to the World Series in 87, and 83, and I was ecstatic again. And I was always rooting for them. And Mike Schmidt was and will always be my favorite player of all time. So I always followed him, tuned into the Phillies whenever they were on TV. And they'll always be special in my heart just because of that.
Andy, ask the question because I know you want to, because who's your iconic favorite Phillies player? It's not Mike Schmidt, but it's pretty close.
It is pretty close. But I did want to point out something, because you gave a little bit of a history lesson there, Brad. The Big Eight. A lot of people may not know the Big Eight is actually the Big 12. So
that's right. That's right.
So,
yes. I know that I'm dating myself there.
Yeah, well, all three of us actually.
Yeah, exactly.
So Tug McGraw. Do you have any interaction with Tug McGraw?
Yeah, so a couple of Tug McGraw stories. So he had a son named Mark that was maybe a year or two younger than me, and so similar to some of the other sons, whenever he was around, we'd play catch together. We'd do those kind of things. I remember one year in New York. I guess it was that last year, Dad took me on a road trip to New York, and we actually lit sparklers and fireworks in some alley behind the hotel because it was right around the 4th of July, which I know is really random, but I remember being out there with Tug McGraw and his son. I have a picture of Dad. He's coaching Tug McGraw, in that picture.
Awesome.
And it's funny, Tug McGraw and Dad always had a bet that Dad has worn a flat top his whole life. He's never had longer hair than a flat top from the time he was born in 1933. And obviously during the 70s, there was a lot of Phillies players like Tug who had long hair. Right. And Dad had a bet with him. If you guys win the World Series, then I will, Dad said, I'll come to spring training next year with long hair, but that means you have to come, Tug, you have to come with a flat top. And they had kind of this handshake agreement that if we win the World Series, then we'll do that. Well, Dad was already gone by the time they won the World Series. But yeah, great memories of Tug. And then about, I guess it was probably 15 years ago or so, some former members of the Phillies and their wives had helped run the Tim McGraw Foundation. And they reached out to Dad and invited Dad to come to New York to an event to benefit the Tim McGraw Foundation. And so I went out there, my wife and I and my niece and Dad went out there. We got to meet Tim McGraw, and he put on a little concert. And it was a lot of former Phillies players because, similar to Dad, they had reached out to quite a few former Phillies that were connected to Tug. And so it was for a couple of years we went out there. Dad and I went out there, and yeah, it was a great benefit, and got to kind of meet Tim McGraw and get our picture taken with him. And I didn't bring that with me, but I've got a great picture of Dad and I and Tim McGraw, it's pretty cool because Tim McGraw is such a big star, but I think it's even cooler because there was a connection between Tug and Dad. So yeah, great stuff.
Yeah, he's one of my favorite non-Cardinals. So yeah.
There you go. Yeah, and yeah, just I have great memories of watching him pitch and his little antics. You know, he always used to pat his glove when he came off the mound, and that was his little sign to his wife, you know, saying, or, you know, are you okay? I'm okay, that kind of thing. So yeah, pretty cool deal.
Great story. So
yeah.
Tim McCarver said something about Tug McGraw one time on TV. So I want to know if you know if this is true or not. So he used to name all his pitches after certain types of alcoholic beverages. So do you know?
I don't know if that's true, but I could see a catcher knowing that for sure. And maybe Dad knows that. I've not heard Dad say that, but entirely possible. And
this has been years ago, but I remember McCarver talking about it on a broadcast. So I do always wondered about that. That's really true.
Yeah, you know what? Not to get off track here, but I love Tim McCarver as a broadcaster. Maybe I'm biased because I knew him a little bit when he was a catcher with the Phillies, and his daughters actually babysat me a little bit. But I always enjoy some of the stories and insights that he provides. I know some people he rubs the wrong way, I guess, but I always enjoyed listening to him on the broadcast.
Oh yeah.
Well, you'll have to get back.
Get some stories too.
Yeah.
Yeah.
You'll have to get back to us on that answer when you talk to your dad about the drinks.
I will.
What was the one that you asked, Andy? What was it called? Cuddy
Shark.
Yeah.
Cuddy Shark. Yeah, that was a Scotch, I think, right?
Right. Yeah.
Cuddy Shark, I think.
Shark. Yeah, you're right.
Yep.
Cool. So hey, transitioning into your days then coming up with the Durham Bulls and all that sort of stuff. So you get drafted out of Kansas State. You land with the Braves organization. Again, any kind of feelings about, man, I wish it was with the Phillies or, you know, with the local Cardinals, or at the point, I guess you're just happy to be drafted, right?
I was so ecstatic to be drafted. I never even remember thinking about it. I don't remember thinking about caring who drafted me. And I never gave it a second thought. I was just so ecstatic to get drafted and just kind of get started, you know. So I got drafted and I went to Idaho Falls, and I mean, I remember signing my contract, and I had like 5 days to get to Idaho Falls, and, you know, packed everything up and jumped in the car, saw my girlfriend, who's now became my wife, on the way at Kansas State, and kept on driving out into the Wild West. Right. And I think back now, before cell phones or anything, I just had a map. It was like, I got to get to Idaho Falls. You know, I'm driving through Colorado and Wyoming and not knowing where the heck I am. And in Wyoming, I remember driving for hours. It was late at night. I would go an hour without seeing a car. You know, it was just crazy out there. And but at the time I didn't think anything of it. This is what I'm supposed to do. And I did it, had a great time in Idaho Falls. And then the next year was lucky enough to play in Durham, which that was 92. And I think the movie came out in 87 or 88, but there was still a lot of excitement about the Durham Bulls kind of from the movie. And it was, every night was just kind of a carnival-like atmosphere there, and I know, Brian, we ran into each other out there way back then, and you can kind of back me up on that, but it was a fun place to play. There was more going on than just the ball game. It was, people were just excited to be there, and there were things going on like a lot of minor league stadiums. I guess they did things in between every inning and had stuff going on top of the dugouts. And yeah, it's just a great time, just fond memories from that.
Got to ask the question too. So yes, I did visit you out there in 92 back in my old News Democrat days. Great interview. I won't tell you how all the stuff I had to do, because they're like, who are you? And you're from St. Louis, and what are you doing here in Durham? I had to explain that I was on my honeymoon, but coming back and breaking up the drive to see my wife's older brother, and especially at the time, or I think 2 or 3 year old nephew. So anyway, that was a lot of fun. Now you're just
like I said, I still got the article that you wrote about me way back then. Somehow my mom saved that, and I still had it. Kind of amazing, but yeah, small world.
Yeah, I know, that's awesome. So thank you for that. Yeah, I got to show that to my daughters and my wife, and they're like, somebody saved that? I'm like, it was, I guarantee it wasn't Brad. It had to be his mom or his dad. Not that he wouldn't. I'm writing in Belleville, Illinois, and he's in, Durham, North Carolina. Big difference.
I think my mom must have cut it out and stashed it away for me or something. She knew this day was going to come. So
Yeah.
Well, very good. One quick question about the Durham Bulls, and then we'll transition over to the Cards and some of your favorite collectibles. But got to ask, when at the time that I was, there visiting you, I think I even remember reading in the article that you came close and won it at the time. It hit a half a dozen to 8 or 9 home runs already that year. And did you ever hit the bull, or did you ever play with anybody who did for the free steak dinner? And was it a free steak dinner, or what was the payoff if you hit the bull?
You definitely got a free steak dinner. That was legitimate. There was a little steakhouse in town, and you got a steak dinner. I did not. The bull was right down the right field line. And I did hit quite a few home runs that year, but not many opposite field home runs. And so I might have come close a couple times, but never won a steak dinner. I did have several teammates that did. As a matter of fact, my roommate did. He was a left-handed hitter. And, at that time we had no money. And they gave away a couple things. They did give away, if you hit a home run, they gave away some gift certificate to some like deli in town. And then they had the Shoney's play of the day. If you made a great defensive play, you got a $20 gift certificate to Shoney's or something like that. And my roommate and I, anytime we did something positive and it meant we got free food, then we were so excited, because again, in the minor leagues, we were getting by on nothing. And so I remember some of those perks, but I did not hit the bull. We were talking about transition into cards. I'll hold this card up because this is one of my favorites, because that's Chipper Jones' upper deck rookie card. And he was my teammate in Durham. And so I saw him hit the bull a couple times. And obviously, as far as teammates go, I was fortunate to play with a lot of good ones, but he's at the top of the list as far as talent goes. Far and away the best player I ever played with. And as I guess not everybody he's come across maybe thinks the world of him. I don't know, but he was always great to my wife and I. It's still, when I cross paths with him to this day, treats me like an old friend and an old teammate. So.
And you had mentioned this too in the lead up as we were talking about doing this. When did you know that he was something special? Because a guy who can really smoke the baseball, hit it over the fence, that, the sound of the ball coming off the bat is, different than so many other people. Could you kind of tell a little bit of a story when we were talking, you were like, you knew he was going to be something special?
Yeah. So I got drafted in 91 and he got drafted in 90, but he was out of high school. So he was younger than me, but yet had already been in the system year. So after my first year in 91 in Idaho Falls, we got sent to instructional league. and he got sent to instructional league as well. So that was the first time I had met him and played with him. And I remember after a couple of days calling my dad, which back then, again, no cell phones or whatever, but I would call dad several times a week and just tell him how things were going and so forth. And I can't remember if dad asked about him or if I brought him up, but I remember specifically telling dad, look, dad, this guy is unbelievable. Yeah. I mean, I had a little power. He hit with the same kind of power or more than I had from both sides of the plate. And he was one of the fastest guys on the field. Once he got to the big leagues, he had torn his ACL and he got to be kind of the middle of the order guy. So he didn't run as much, but in the minor leagues, he was one of the fastest guys on our team. So, and then had one of the best arms and could hit for power from both sides of the plate. So you just kind of looked at him and were like, Jesus, this guy is legit, and in his early years in the minors, like a lot of high school guys do, they struggle a little bit just with the adjustment to a wooden bat, being away from home, maturity, the whole deal. And so if you look at his first couple of years in the minors, he had a lot of errors, didn't really set the world on fire. And all of a sudden something clicked. He got to Double-A, and it wasn't long before he was in the Hall of Fame. It was, but really, really, really good.
Very cool. Yeah. And then one other quick question about the Braves. Then, like I said, we'll transition to the collectibles then. So you were telling the story. Did your dad then, after retiring for 10 years, get back into baseball? You were mentioning something earlier about you playing against him when he was coaching in the minors.
Yeah. So around the time I was a senior in high school, my dad and uncle decided to sell off parts of their family farm. They were both getting a little older and didn't want to be as involved in the farm. And my dad really wanted to start getting back into baseball. And he knew I was going to go away to college. And so there wasn't as much reason for him to have to be home. I was the youngest in the family. And so I think he just had this urge to get back into pro baseball. So he worked part-time for the Phillies in 1988. And then in 89 and 90, he was the AAA pitching coach for the Reds. So I would come home from the summers and I would play for the Valmeyer Lakers. But during the week, if my dad was home in Nashville, Tennessee, I would drive down there and I would kind of be like a little kid again. I would go out, I would take batting practice, shag fly balls, and then watch the game from the first row behind home plate, go home, talk to dad about the game, wake up the next day and do it again. I would do that for 3 or 4 days, and then I would come home and play for the Lakers on the weekend. So I was really lucky, but it really prepared me for pro baseball and the draft and what those guys go through every day and so forth. Well, then when I got drafted, dad was in 1991, the Reds made him the roving pitching coach. So he was going from team to team for 5 to 7 days and then would come home for a few days. Well, I got drafted, I got sent to Idaho Falls, and the Reds happened to have a team, Billings, in the same league as us. So dad arranged his schedule so that whenever we were playing Billings, he would come out and he would be the pitching coach for the Billings team. So our first series was in Idaho Falls, and he and my mom drove all the way out there to Idaho. And so I'll show you this picture. So this picture was taken before a game in Idaho. He's in his Reds uniform and I'm in my Braves uniform. And about 2 hours after that picture was taken, I took one of dad's pitchers deep, and I was pretty happy about that, and so I remember crossing home plate and my mom was sitting, not too far behind home plate in the second or third row. And I remember pointing at her, and I'll always remember thinking, I got back to the bench and I remember thinking really more about my mom than anything, thinking that's got to be pretty cool for mom to have her husband in one dugout and her son in the other dugout, and to see her son hit a home run. I was almost happy for her because she was just this great baseball mom that, she followed my dad all over the country and then started following me all over the country. And she just kind of did whatever was required to allow us to be in baseball, and so it was a really cool deal.
At the plate, and then we'll start talking about the collectibles, because I know you got a bunch of stuff too that you want to talk about.
Yeah. I'll finish that story real quick. It was just funny because I got run over at home plate and was actually knocked out for a few seconds. And when I come through, my manager's on one side with my trainer, and Dad is on the other side of me, and they're leaning over me as I'm laying in the dirt, but Dad's in a Reds uniform, and I'm having trouble figuring out kind of where I'm at and why is Dad, in a different uniform. And after a few seconds, it starts to come together, and my trainer is kind of, hitting me a little bit and going, Brad, do you know where you are? Do you know where you are? And I said, yeah, I'm in bleeping Billings, Montana. and then everybody started laughing, and I sat up, and the trainer looked at my dad and goes, Mr. Rippelmeyer, I think he's going to be okay. I was like, yeah, I'm fine. Again, we went out to eat that night with my mom and dad, and I don't remember much of going out to eat, but it still good memories.
So did you have many crashes at the plate back then?
Yeah, I had 2 or 3 pretty good ones. That one was probably the worst. I don't think I was ever really knocked out, but that one I think I still have the catcher's helmet somewhere, and it's got a big red splotch from the guy kind of running into me. But yeah, it happened occasionally back then, and then they outlawed it more recently, which I know a lot of old school guys, and I consider myself kind of an old school guy, didn't like to take that out of the game because they think it's part of the game. But really, there's no need for somebody to be in a vulnerable position and just be able to get run over like that. Really, I'm an old school catcher, and if they were going to leave it in the game, that would have been fine with me too. But I get it, So yeah, good stuff.
Yeah, one of my favorite memories, unfortunately, it's our Cardinals. Your Phillies when Ray Langford lowered the boom that time on Darren Dalton. And being a former football player, just put the shoulder right into him. And that was the hardest I'd seen anybody get taken out at home plate in a long time. Yeah.
And man, Dalton was a big, tough guy too,
Yeah.
And but when you're in that position, you're somebody's running full speed and you're just standing still. You're going to get the worst of it almost no matter how big you are, Right. So yeah, it's a tough deal.
So talking about your collection then, and I'll let Andy jump in and start asking a bunch of questions here too. But
Sure.
At what point, how old are you when you, discover baseball cards? And when you're doing that, regardless if it's a Philly or a Cardinal or whoever, we always ask this question. Do you recall when you opened that first wax pack, who the very first player was in that wax pack?
I was thinking about it today, and I honestly don't. I know, and we're going to talk about 76 here, and my earliest recollection was that year, and I have quite a few cards from that year, which makes me think that's when I really started getting into it. But I can't remember actually if I went and bought my first wax pack at the 7-Eleven in Philadelphia, or if they were handing them out at the stadium, or if Dad got a few packs just from Topps. I have no idea. I just know when I look back through my collection, I've got a few random cards from before that I had purchased on my own once I got into collecting. But those are the first ones where I have a couple hundred cards where there's common guys that I know I didn't go out and buy, that I must have been buying packs or somehow received packs from Dad or something. So that's part of the reason why that year sticks with me, but also because I just like the card itself. So I do know I was partial to all Phillies players, even at that young age. I would have rather had a common Phillies player than an all-star from the Cardinals, I guess, or something like that. I mean, that's just the way I was wired at that age. So
yes, you loved Greg Gross cards, is what you're saying.
I would have taken
Right.
Greg Gross or Terry Harmon or Del Unser over the best player the Cardinals had, Bob Forsch or something like that for sure. So yeah, that again, just the way I was wired at that age.
So did you buy cards? Go ahead, Andy.
Well, I was going to say, because we talked about this before, Brian and I, because we always put the worst cards on the outside with the rubber band, so that our good cards would, we probably had some Phillies cards on the outside.
I bet you did. You've got creases in your Phillies cards. I bet.
Yep.
All right.
That's great.
You guys can probably hear my crazy dogs, can't you?
No, that's all right.
That's all right. Mine hasn't come up to bother us yet, but I'm waiting. So.
Yeah, I'm glad you picked this
Yeah.
particular set though, because it's a cool design. Always liked it, and that was, obviously, Brian and I were in grade school, and we were swapping these cards out, and got a lot of the, our favorite players on it because, Ted Simmons and, like you said, Bob Forrest, Lou Brock
Yep.
was, coming
Oh
to
yeah.
the end of his career at that particular time, and one of my
Yep.
guys too on the Cardinals was Bake McBride. And I was sorry to see him actually leave the team when but that was he was.
Yeah, and he came to the Phillies actually.
Yep.
So yeah. I remember Bake. He used a really little bat he was a decent sized guy. He used a very short bat, and he had the big afro like a lot of guys did at the time, and smoked cigarettes occasionally, which a lot of guys did at the time. But those were some of my. I remember he walked real pigeon-toed. He would walk into the clubhouse and he'd have his shower shoes and like a t-shirt and just his Phillies pants on. And I remember watching him walk, and it's like, man, how does he walk like that? But he was blazing fast, and man, always a good guy. I was a little kid, but he always treated me great, so I liked Bake.
You just reminded me of something. I'm gonna pull the card out here in just a second. Or maybe I won't. There it is. So you're talking about players smoking. So this is the last player that I remember smoking on TV, and he happened to be on the Cardinals during that period of time, and it was none other than
Keith Hernandez.
Yeah. So yeah, I just thought about that particular clip, and I think the last time he was playing with the Indians when they actually showed that on TV, and he was in.
Oh, really?
Yeah. That was toward the very end of it, near the end of his career. So
very end of his career.
Remember that. Yeah, but always loved Keith Hernandez.
Yeah, I did too. And that he was one of those guys too that because when I was little and detested the Cardinals, I didn't like him. But as time went on, I started to realize how great of a player he was, and didn't necessarily like the Mets in the 80s when he was with them, but you started realizing, man, this guy was pretty good for a long time. Yeah, So
I don't think any Cardinals fan liked the Mets during the 80s.
No, definitely not.
That's right. That's right. Pond scum. That's right.
Yeah, well, that's the other thing too. Because the divisions were different back then than they are now. So that's why, being in the National League East, a lot of people, either if they're younger than us, obviously showing our age again, don't remember the way the divisions were set up.
Yeah, it's hard.
So the
hard for a lot
were,
of people. Hard for a lot of people now to think why would the Mets and Cardinals be rivals? But for a couple of years, man, it was it was serious rivalry, which was great.
Whitey and Davey.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah.
So going back for just a second, when you guys were talking about, and that you both triggered that memory about the smoking in the dugout. Why all of a sudden now that brings back those. You remember how This Week in Baseball was such a big thing at the house, like on a Saturday, and it didn't matter what it was doing outside. Your parents probably wanted you to be outside. You had to watch This Week in Baseball with Mel Allen, and you had to watch the game of the week, I guess is what really was called. Yep. And I just remember it was the Orioles and somebody, and my last memory of somebody was Mark Belanger, the old Orioles shortstop. I mean, he's just all of a sudden, then he realizes that the camera is on him, and this looks priceless as he's fumbling his cigarette and trying to.
I know. It is crazy. It was just kind of the norm back then, but then all of a sudden guys had to be aware of it. But crazy.
So who do you have the whole Phillies set then from '76, or do you have the whole collection?
I don't have the whole set. I still have a lot of the ones that I collected at that time. I've got a lot of commons, but then I kind of separated out and put some in hard case of what are kind of my favorite, either guys that were some of my favorite players or guys that went on to be really good. So I have my favorite Mike Schmidt, obviously, from that year. And one of my favorite things about that one is, well, for one thing, it's kind of an action shot, which not all cards were at that time. A lot of cards were just, some kind of picture during spring training or whatever. But I also love the white spikes that he's sporting because I just think those are cool, especially at the time. A couple other ones. I've got Dave Winfield, who went on obviously to a pretty good career. I've got Nolan Ryan.
Love that card.
Oh yeah.
Yeah, great card there. I just read something on Twitter. I guess it was either earlier today that it was some throwback to a news article where he had pitched 13 innings and struck out 19. He struck out Cecil Cooper 6 times in one game. So, something crazy, threw 200 pitches or something like that. I mean, the stats on the game were crazy, but yeah, so I love my Nolan Ryan card. I got Willie McCovey, who was another great player, and Dad told me lots of different stories about him, not just with the Padres, but then when he was with the Giants as well. And then this is one of my favorite cards too, for a couple of reasons. I always loved Willie Stargell. But if you can see on there, I had him sign this because my first year with the Braves when I got drafted, he was our roving hitting coach. And once he found out who I was and who Dad was, he kind of took a liking to me. And we always had a lot of really special conversations. And somehow or another, over those couple of years when he was in the Braves organization, I remembered to take a few cards to spring training and have him sign one. And he was one of the nicest guys I've ever met in professional baseball. For a big guy like he was and an intimidating guy, he was just as soft spoken and soft hearted as it got. So so those are a couple of my favorites from that year. And I was thinking, after we talked about that being one of my favorite years, that I really need to scour the internet and search for, even if it's more Phillies, just to have some of those guys that I remember growing up watching when Dad was coaching and so forth from that particular year. But
Yeah, you bring up a lot of great players there, and you made me think of one of my favorite Pirate players was Dave Parker.
Dave Parker, the Cobra, right?
Yeah. Just loved watching him play. Man, else.
Yeah, he was great. And I did, as I was going through my cards, I saw a couple Dave Parker cards. I don't think I had one from this particular year, but yeah, he was phenomenal. And we were talking about that National League East rivalry thing. The Phillies beat the Pirates the last series of the year in 1978 to get to the playoffs. And they kind of became the Phillies rival for at least a couple years there. And I remember being in Pittsburgh, and again, I was, it was Willie Stargell and Dave Parker and Bill Madlock and all these awesome players. Omar Marino was their center fielder, and
Rennie
Frank
Stennett.
Taveras. Yeah, they just had a bunch of good players. And I remember as a little kid thinking, God, I don't know how we're going to beat these guys, and somehow we did. So yeah, good times. And those were some of the stories I talked to Willie Stargell about later when he was my hitting coach. And we would just sit down on the bench after batting practice and talk about the Phillies and the Pirates and all the players during that era. It's pretty cool experience to get to talk to him 15 years after the fact,
Yeah, so to just thinking about something with Hernandez, to just bring back Hernandez for a second. This is the last, also with Hernandez, this is the last time without facial hair for Hernandez.
Really?
Any of his cards. So Brian and I talk about this a lot too, because obviously the Mad Hungarian,
yes, there you go.
It still does as of today, but it's cool to look at the transition from the 50s, 60s, and 70s, especially because obviously back in the 50s and 60s everybody's more clean cut, but you start seeing in the late 60s, you start seeing that transition. Some guys are starting to sport a little hair, and then the mustache coming in. And
it was definitely different. And there's some pretty funny cards out there, and some guys with some pretty funny looks, that they were sporting during that time, which at the time was normal, But when you look at it now, you're like, man, that's pretty shocking that guy was walking around like that.
We had some of those discussions with Norm Sanders when he was a guest a couple of shows ago. We had a lot of good laughs about that. One other fun question to ask you, Brad, and I love it that you have your favorite cards that you just showed and a lot of childhood memories. So Andy and I have this conversation a couple of times, when we're showing cards. Thankfully for me, the 76, I think I may only have one of them that has a crease in it. But do you have a lot of, some of your common cards? Do you still have those when you were a first little kid and you held on to them because it was just a baseball card? And to this day, are you ever looking to replace those, or are they too near and dear to your heart that they're always a part of your collection?
Yeah, I think they're always a part of my collection. I have not done a great job of organizing all my cards. I use different tactics at different times, and so it's kind of a hodgepodge. But I do have, it's like a clothes box with all these commons from the 70s and early 80s. And I was just looking through them tonight before we got started, and I don't think I ever want to part with them, even though they're commons. You look and you recognize a certain name or a certain card style or something, or one that you just forgot what it even looked like, or that guy even played, and I think that portion of my collection is still kind of a cool thing to look at every once in a while.
Oh, yeah.
So I don't think I'll ever part with those. To be honest, I don't think I'll ever part with any of my cards. My kids might at some point, but I don't spend much time looking at how much they're worth and thinking about, oh, I could sell it for this or whatever. They're my cards, and it's just part of me. So
I know we're going to be getting close to wrapping up here soon. So outside of cards, I know you got a lot of cool photos on the back, and one of the things that we talked about leading up to it. What's one or two of your favorite pieces of memorabilia in your collection, whether it's something that your dad gave to you eventually, or it's something that you obtained? And then I want to make sure, if you have it handy, you texted me a photo of that
the
cube that your daughter made for you.
I'll talk about that first. So my dad had 2 major league cards as a player. He had quite a few as coaches, and the coaching cards were kind of random, during the 70s. Sometimes it'd be the manager's picture with little bitty pictures of the coaches or what have you. But my dad's his 2 major league cards are 61 and 62 for the Washington Senators. And actually one's with the Cincinnati Reds and the other one's with the Washington Senators. So my daughter, who was a graphic design major in college, she called me one day and said, "Hey, I have to do this project. And this is what I was thinking. I want to take grandpa's baseball cards, and I want to get as many of them as I can. I want to cut them up and then piece them back together in kind of a collage." So we went online, and I was able to find somebody that had like 30 or 40 of them for about $1 a piece or whatever. And I had them shipped down to Auburn, where she was going to school. And she did this cube, and each side is made up of little, they're all 1 square inch pieces of cards. So she went through and cut both of those cards up into little pieces, and then she put them back together in kind of a random format. And it turned out to be a pretty cool thing. And then it actually sits by itself. And so I've got it down in my memorabilia case, and it's a pretty cool conversation starter, because if you look real close, you can see at times, a close-up of his face, just depending on what she cut and where she cut. But so that's one of my favorite things, partially because it's dad, but partially because she did it. Other things, I got so many cool things, and a lot of them are down in my memorabilia case, and a lot of them are just they're meaningful for a specific reason, maybe to me, and they're not necessarily worth anything or as meaningful to anybody else. I do have one thing, and I don't think I mentioned this to you, Brian, but I've got an Upper Deck card of Michael Jordan here. Now this was before he played baseball. Because this is going back. This is Upper Deck 91, so this is just when the White Sox had him down, kind of as just as a celebrity to come down to spring training. It wasn't until a couple years later when he actually played minor league baseball. But when he did play minor league baseball, my best friend and teammate from college was his teammate. And I was a member of the wedding party. And as a wedding gift to all the groomsmen, he gave autographed Michael Jordan baseballs. So,
Nice.
So it's really cool. I've got a Michael Jordan baseball I've got a bunch of autographed baseballs from different teams and different people. But having Michael Jordan in the mix is kind of a cool thing, because I was a pretty big Michael Jordan fan growing up. So,
Everybody was.
Yeah. That's cool. I had Mike Schmidt's glove. Mike Schmidt gave me his glove in like 1977 or 78. and just said, here, I want you to have this. And I think it was just because Dad had thrown him a lot of batting practice over the years, and I was around a lot.
Or
And
because you caught your first ball from him.
Maybe it was, you know. As a matter of fact, it was using that glove because he had given it to me before that day in Houston. But I come home and, you know, I'm not in baseball. Dad's not in baseball anymore. We actually shared, like my buddies and I, we all shared that glove like you did when you were playing ball in the park. You'd play shortstop or wherever, and then when you came in to hit, you'd give your glove to somebody else. And then there were days we used it as a base. And I think back now, and I'm like, what were we doing? We're using Mike Schmidt gave me his glove, and I was using it as a base, and I was letting my idiot friends use it. Like, I should have put that somewhere in a lockbox, I guess, but I don't know. You know, at the time, you just think, that's no big deal. It's just a guy gave me his glove. That's great. Let's use it. So I still have that downstairs too. It's just not in very good shape.
So do you happen to have this card? I'm just curious. Let me see if I can bring this up here. I apologize. You happen to have this card by chance?
I do have that card. Yeah, I got a handful of those. I think my kids have a couple of those. You had mentioned the Durham Bowl earlier, Brian. So this is probably my favorite card from my time in the minors, because in the background, right above my hat, is the actual Durham Bowl,
Right.
and it's right down the right field line. And so I do like that one just because it has the bull back there. My wife always liked the cards that were just more of my face and like me smiling. I always liked the cards where I looked tough or mean, and
of course,
I don't know. You know, that's just, again, kind of the way it is, I guess. But so she probably would have liked the one that you held up better because it shows me smiling and looking a little nicer.
Very clean cut, by the way. So you're not like any of these cards we're looking at right now.
Well,
right.
my dad was not going to let me grow long hair, and he still frowns at me because I have this little growth on my face now. Like, Dad, I'm 51. I can do whatever I want. But he still looks at me a little sideways like, you need to shave, you know. But
well, I'll share a quick dad story because Brian always likes my dad stories. My dad just passed away back in April, so I always got a lot of good dad stories for baseball, things like that. But you just brought up one. So my brother, and Brian knows my brother, but he hasn't seen him in a long time. So he looks like Bozo the Clown now because his hair is out here. He wears a ball cap all the time. He's a school teacher. He looks like Albert Einstein's crazy grandson, but and he has a beard. So when I got out of the Air Force, I retired from the Air Force, I started growing facial hair and stuff because, you know, I had shaved for, 20 years, like every day. And I was like, I don't want to do that anymore. So the first time I came to the house and he said, what happened to your face? And then I had my hair was a little bit longer, and he said, did your barber die? So every Christmas he would take a coffee can, the old, like a Folgers coffee can.
Yes.
And I knew it was him wrapping it, but he would stick in there razor blades and shaving cream, and then wrap it up. And that every Christmas.
Every Christmas.
Every Christmas.
That's fantastic.
Yep.
Yeah, it is.
Hey, Brad, one other final note. I want to let you give a shout out. So tell everybody, that I know that you're working for Stiefel these days. Tell everybody what you're kind of doing, post baseball life. I know you got some adult children now, or one of them's about to get married in the not too distant future. I don't know if you want to talk all about that or not. I don't want to get into any privacy things or whatever, but tell us a little bit about, what you're doing with Stiefel.
Sure. So after I got done playing, I played in the minor league 6 years. Then I coached for 3 years because I thought I was going to do what Dad did. I thought I'm going to play as long as somebody will let me play, and then I'm going to coach the rest of my life. And during that time of coaching, we had twin daughters, and my wife was home with them full time, and I'm on the road in who knows where, West Virginia or wherever, on a bus at 6 a.m. Yeah. We have zero money in our checking account. And there was just days where I'd be like, what in the world am I doing? And I obviously loved baseball, and that was my passion, but there just came a point where I thought, maybe this isn't what I'm supposed to be doing. And I decided to get out of pro ball and come back home. But I decided to get into finance. I had a few people who talked to me about that that career and thought I would be good at it and so forth. And I thought there was maybe an avenue that I could do that and still stay involved in baseball. And that was, can I do financial planning for pro baseball players? So that was 2000. And now we're 21 years later, and that's what I've been doing ever since. And I've been really fortunate that I've got to work with some great players. And I mean, fortunate from a personal standpoint because I've got to be friends with and watch great players play, and they've become friends of mine, not just clients. And so that's been exciting and fun for not just me, but my family. But it's been good professionally too, because if you're dealing with great players, then obviously they have a need for financial planning. So I've been real fortunate, and I started with a different company, and I've gone through a couple different companies, and now I'm with Stiefel. Interestingly, I'm partnered with a former teammate of mine that was on that same Durham Bulls team in 1992 when you came to see us. His dad had played in the big leagues. His dad's name was Joe Sparma, and he pitched against the Cardinals in the '68 World Series. He was a pitcher for the Tigers, and he and I, as teammates, kind of hit it off because we both had dads that were involved in baseball, and we were both really passionate about it, both on and off the field. We were just kind of wired the same way, and never thought we'd be working together. But about 10 years ago, he approached me and said, "Hey, and we knew we were in the same business." He said, "I think we should partner up and start doing this thing together." And so we did, and it's just fantastic. It's allowed me to have somewhat of a normal home and family life, which pro baseball players don't have,
Right.
and pro baseball coaches. So I've been able to have somewhat of a normal home and family life, but still get a little taste of pro baseball, and I get to stay involved a little bit. So just couldn't be better. And like I said, we're fortunate. We deal with some great players. We've had 3 or 4 world champions, had Cy Young Award winners, and 5 or 6 All-Stars. We have probably 2 or 3 guys are going to be first-round picks in the upcoming Major League drafts. So it's exciting, it's fun, and you feel like you're hopefully making a difference for some of these guys. So, yeah, all good.
And I know you can't name any names, but any members of the Cardinal system?
Yes, we have one guy. We have actually 2 guys with the Cardinals. One guy is in the big leagues with the Cardinals, and one guy that's in the minor leagues with the Cardinals. And both of them are similar in that they're just grinding, trying to make it. The guy in the big leagues is trying to hang in the big leagues. The guy in the minor leagues is trying to get there. And so they're like so many guys. They're just on that path and trying to make it. So good stuff.
Well, good. I'm glad that it's going well, and I'm glad that you and I reconnected after 29 years.
Yeah,
I know
absolutely.
I know it's not Durham, and like I said, Andy and I are having a blast doing this. We'd love to have you again sometime, Brad, because I know you have tons of stories to tell, and we didn't even scratch of the surface.
Yeah, anytime. I would I'd be on with you guys anytime. I love talking baseball, love talking cards and memorabilia, so anytime.
Well,
and cool dad stories too.
Yes.
Yeah, and there's plenty more of those as well.
Oh,
so.
yeah.
Yeah. Well, maybe we'll do it sometime where we can have him just do a cameo appearance or whatever, and he can just
it's funny you mention that, because when we came home today, I was like, I could make Dad come inside for just 10 minutes, but I know he's at that age where he wants to be in his chair watching baseball by about 6:30.
Right.
So we were already pushing the envelope.
Yes. I totally get that. Well, again, we appreciate it. So I'll get ready to wrap up. Any other closing thoughts from you, Andy, or are you good?
No, I just want to say thanks. I appreciate you coming and doing this with us. We're just doing this for fun because we enjoy collecting, and obviously enjoy talking baseball. And I've been talking baseball for 50 plus years now. So ever since we were, I guess, in kindergarten or wherever.
Yep.
Brian in Jefferson grade school back in the day. So
I'm sure we were kicked out of class a couple of times.
What's that?
So I'm sure we were kicked out of class a couple of times for talking baseball and not paying any attention to the math or the science.
I bet. I think we all were, right? I know I was.
Probably had the cards confiscated and stuff like that.
Oh, yeah.
But again, Brad, thanks. I really appreciate it, and look forward to talking to you again, because I just love listening to the stories you tell and all the interactions you have. So really cool. So thanks again.
Yeah, awesome. Anytime. Anytime.
Okay.
I look forward to seeing more of your guys' shows and keep following you guys on Twitter. All right.
Cool.
Yeah, no, that'll work. So I'll get ready to close. Again, everybody, we appreciate you joining this really extended episode of Bird Brain 66. But, Brad Rippelmeyer again, Pride 1B of Valmeyer, Illinois,
That's
with
right.
his dad, Ray, being 1A. So we'll give your dad props there. But again, great job with Stiefel. I'm Brian Bretsch. He's
Danny T.
And you can find us on YouTube, BirdBrain66, our Twitter handle at BirdBrain66, and on Facebook. Imagine that, BirdBrain66. So with that, again, Brad, can't thank you enough. It was a blast. I could talk for hours. Next time we should do it somewhere with a cold one where we're not on
we'll
videos.
do that.
Right.
Even better stories. But, hey, and maybe the next time Sanders involved in this too.
That's absolutely. I'd love to have Norm involved.
All righty. Well, thanks again. Brad, I'll
All right.
give you a holler soon.
Yep.
Thanks.
See you guys. Have a great night.
All right.
Yep,
See
you
you.
too.